Imagine eating $5 trillion to buy a single loaf of bread. Flashback to Zimbabwe 2008, and that's what the median cost of a loaf of bread was: 5 trillion Zimbabwean dollars. That is the equivalent of Elon Musk's net worth 10,000 times over. That is a lot of dough for a little bit of bread. We'll be diving into their economic implosion, why the future may be brighter than ever, and the ongoing issues they still face today. Spoiler alert, a loaf of bread still costs over $300 in their modern, revamped currency. And hopefully the next time you're at a bar and the art major asks why we can't just print more money, you can point them in the direction of this video. Before we had modern-day Zimbabwe, we had Rhodesia.
American, huh?
Guilty.
Well, Americans usually are.
Says the white South African.
I'm from Rhodesia.
We say Zimbabwe now, don't we?
Do we?
In 1965, Rhodesia unilaterally declared independence under Ian Smith, doubling down on white rule while Africa decolonized. What followed was over a decade of guerrilla warfare, what we now know as the Rhodesian Bush War. The Zimbabwe African National Union, or ZANU for short, fought a series of bush wars against the British colonists responsible for establishing Rhodesia. They were led by this guy. Robert Mugabe became the country's first prime minister in 1980. Many had hoped for a Mandela, but what they got was something else entirely. The new Zimbabwe actually inherited a strong agricultural base, mostly controlled by white farmers and a relatively stable currency. But underneath the surface, resentment, inequality, and a government that believed it could rewrite economics ultimately led to a boiling point. In 2000, Mugabe launched a radical land reform campaign. He forcibly redistributed white-owned farms to black Zimbabweans. In theory, this was justice, but in practice, it was chaos. Many of the citizens that inherited the land lacked the agricultural education and skills needed to cultivate the land. It would be like handing a history major the keys to a nuclear power plant. The country's food production collapsed nearly overnight. Zimbabwe, once the breadbasket of Africa, became reliant on foreign aid. Meanwhile, corruption ran wild, political elites looted state resources, and Mugabe printed money to fund everything from military spending to failing state-run industries. The result? By 2008, annual inflation had hit 89.7 sextillion%. That is 21 zeros. No, that is not a typo, that is literally the scientific notation. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, or RBZ for short, was printing absurd denoms of cash. At its peak, the Reserve Bank issued a $100 trillion note worth about 40 US cents. The price of items was doubling every 24.7 hours on average, and people were being paid in cash daily because tomorrow it'd be worth about half. You needed literal wheelbarrows of cash to buy groceries. Basic economic logic broke down, ATMs ran dry, and supermarkets were emptied. And through all this chaos, Mugabe's regime blamed everyone but themselves. Western sanctions, saboteurs, colonial legacy, and they never once blamed their poor policy. They are politicians after all, and by 2009, the Zimbabwean dollar was so worthless that the government ditched it altogether. They legalized foreign currencies, mainly the US dollar and the South African rand. So how does it look now in present-day Zimbabwe? Well, Mugabe was ousted in a 2017 coup and ultimately replaced by former ally Emerson Mnangagwa. Nailed it. It was a pretty new face, but the same old song. In 2019, the Zimbabwean dollar was reintroduced and pegged to the USD, and there was some hope. However, if we've learned one thing from history, it's that it tends to repeat itself. This was no exception. In 2023, annual inflation hovered around 500%. The government blamed price speculators, and the public once again blamed the government, and rightfully so. The country now uses a mishmash of currencies, the US dollar is stable but scarce, and the government has even sanctioned the use of other currencies in certain capacities. So in 2024, the government thought, hey, the third time's the charm, and reintroduced a new version of the Zimbabwean dollar, the ZIG, or Zimbabwe Gold. This move was supposed to stabilize prior hyperinflation with a commodity-backed currency. In 2024, only 26% of transactions, or at least reported transactions, were conducted using this currency. However, that number has risen to 43% by May of 2025. Investors are still weary of the gold-backed currency, though, and that's reflected in daily life. with most transactions occurring outside of formal stores and mostly in street markets where the currency you're allowed to use is less regulated. Africa has become a hotbed of foreign and private equity investment, but Zimbabwe still lags behind due to its instability concerns. Contrast this with nearby nations like South Africa, a founding member of BRICS and a hub for private equity due to the stronger framework it has, infrastructure, and stock market presence. And Mozambique, who attracts foreign powers like the US, China, and Portugal due to their natural gas and energy reserves. Zimbabwe pales in comparison when it comes to foreign and private equity investment. Their largest exporting partner is the United Arab Emirates, accounting for nearly 40% of all exports. This may provide some hope for the future, as the UAE does have close ties with many Western nations, as far as the Middle East is concerned anyway. But with that said, being a nation so dependent on foreign aid is not exactly helping their cause either, with some locals claiming as little as 2% of the aid to Zimbabwe actually reaches the ground by the time everyone with immediate access has received their fair share. Zimbabwe is also extremely underrated in terms of tourism. It has beautiful sites like Victoria Falls, which is the largest waterfall in the world, and it's one of the only places on Earth you can see the 5 big game animals all in one place, with the most recent statistics showing that Zimbabwe ranked 96th in the world in terms of tourism income, and when you compare that with South Africa and Tanzania, which ranked 33rd and 75th respectively, you can see there's a lot of room for growth. So what's life like on the ground in Zimbabwe when the politics and economics aren't stealing the show? Zimbabweans find joy in the everyday. Local chains like Chicken Inn tend to do well. Sports are also huge, especially soccer, rugby, and cricket. Side note, they're even going to the Rugby World Cup in 2027 after winning this year's Africa Cup. Oftentimes, locals will gather at the bars to watch Premier League soccer games and drink Zambezi, which is a beer made from the water on the Zambezi River. And one spot where all of this comes together is the Gongo Home Ground in Harare. It may not be the fanciest place in the world, but that's sort of the point. It's loud, it's packed, and it's where people actually want to be to escape from everyday life and listen to some Afrobeats. Because no matter the inflation rate or who's in office, people still find ways to eat, laugh, and live. And that's what makes this country so beautiful. Zimbabwe's story is a warning to anyone who thinks they are immune to the laws of economics. Ink and paper don't determine how much a bill is worth. It's determined by credibility, stability, and trust. When those foundations crack, you do not have an economy. And remember, the next time someone says, just print more money, smile politely and send them the link to this video. Thanks for watching. This is part 1 of my current events in reverse series. We're going to be starting from Zimbabwe and working our way backwards through the alphabet. Next stop, Zambia. If you haven't already, consider subscribing and drop your takes in the comments. Until next time.